All right, so for this explainer, we are diving into something, well, a little unusual. We're going to look at a series of philosophical papers written about a pretty absurd subject, and we're going to treat it with the deadpan seriousness it absolutely deserves. Because as you're about to see, underneath all the absurdity, there's a really profound debate about our very place in the universe.
It sounds like a crazy question, right? But that's exactly what we're tackling today. Because, as it turns out, one truly bizarre, low-budget instructional video somehow became the unlikely spark for a fierce, high-minded philosophical battle. So let's explore how that could possibly happen.
Yeah, you heard that right. A handful of academics, writing in this super satirical style, published these incredibly dense papers just dissecting this one video. They were using it as a kind of thought experiment, a way to get at some of the deepest questions of existence, from the various structure of reality to the nature of ethics.
So our first perspective here reads the video not as some silly comedy, but as a document of pure, unadulterated cosmic horror. It makes the case that what we're seeing isn't just a simple break-in, but a fundamental collapse of reality itself.
This first theory is built on this really complex idea called non-orientable ontology. Okay, so what does that actually mean? Well, put simply, it argues that the wall of your home, what you think of as your safe space, it isn't a stable barrier at all. The hole doesn't create a new opening, it just reveals a terrifying truth that the inside and the outside were never really separate to begin with.
To explain this, the theory uses the metaphor of a Möbius strip, that twisted loop of paper. If you try to trace a line along its surface, you eventually end up on the other side without ever actually crossing an edge. Well, according to this view, the wall is exactly like that. The boundary between your safe inside and the chaotic outside was always a paradox, an illusion. And the hole? That's just the moment we're finally forced to see it.
And so what comes pouring through this paradoxical hole? Well, according to this theory, the billions aren't just a bunch of individual things. No, they are pure, terrifying quantity, what the paper calls an inconsistent multiple. It's this inhuman swarm of teeming, formless matter that our minds literally cannot process or even begin to count.
So from this perspective, the actual repair job is completely pointless. The guy in the video thinks he's restoring order, right? Building his barricade. But philosophically, this is seen as this tragic failed attempt to impose human form. There's a concept for this, hylomorphism, onto a chaotic reality that just can't be contained. The formless paste he's using is no match for the formless swarm he's trying to block. It's a total failure.
Okay, so that cosmic horror view is cold, it's mathematical, and it's deeply impersonal. It sees the whole event as just a topological breakdown of reality. But a second group of thinkers watched the exact same video and saw something completely different. They asked a new question. What if this isn't about ontology? What if it's about ethics? What if it's about us?
And this is where the second theory comes in, and it builds a totally different picture. It reframes the entire event, not as a horror story, but as this profoundly human drama, an ethical call that demands a response from us. This viewpoint is called the hermeneutics of the breach. It basically argues that the whole isn't some mathematical paradox, but an existential situation. It's a rupture in our everyday world that confronts us, and it calls us to act, to take responsibility, to care. The focus completely shifts from the structure of reality to the meaning of our response.
Now, to explain this, the theory pulls in a concept from the philosopher Martin Heidegger. He said that we usually experience the world as ready to hand. A wall is just a wall. It's part of the background we use for shelter. We don't think twice about it. But when it breaks, when there's a hole, the wall suddenly becomes present at hand. All of a sudden, it's a broken, problematic thing staring you in the face. And that shift reveals just how fragile our world is and forces us to consciously deal with it.
This theory also totally reinterprets the billions. It draws on the work of another philosopher, Emmanuel Levinas, who was all about ethics. And it sees the swarm not as inhuman matter, but as the infinitude of the other. It represents this overwhelming, anonymous, but deeply human presence that places an infinite ethical demand on us. The horror, then, isn't cosmic chaos. It's the crushing weight of a responsibility you can never, ever fully satisfy.
And so, suddenly, the repair attempt is seen in a whole new light. It's not a futile lie anymore. Sure, it's clumsy, it's totally inadequate, but it's a deeply human response. As this quote puts it, it's what happens when we try to solve a profound ethical problem, this call from the other, with a simple technical fix from the hardware store. It's a messy, caring, human act.
So let's just put these two worldviews side by side for a second. For the cosmic horror theory, the whole is a collapse of reality, the swarm is inhuman matter, and the repair is a lie. But for the ethical call theory, the whole is an existential crisis, the swarm is the demand of the other, and the repair is a flawed but meaningful human response. Just two completely different ways of seeing the exact same absurd event.
But of course, the debate didn't end there. A third paper came out, and it was a harsh, direct takedown of that whole ethical humanist viewpoint. Its argument, in short, this entire search for meaning, it's a profound mistake.
This third theorist basically argues that by trying to find some ethical call or human response in all this, the second theory is actually just taming the horror. It's trying to make something that is fundamentally inhuman fit into our cozy little human categories of meaning and care.
And this right here is the rebuttal's core critique. To find an ethical lesson in this chaos is to sanitize the horror. It's just a defense mechanism. By turning the swarm into a face that calls out to us, we get to avoid confronting the terrifying truth that this is a meaningless, impersonal force that does not care about us at all.
So where the ethical view sees a face that's demanding a response, the rebuttal sees the exact opposite, a flood of pure, impersonal chaos. It argues that a true ethical relationship needs a self and an other, right? But a swarm like this doesn't call to the self, it simply dissolves it, making any kind of ethical response impossible from the get-go.
And so the act of repair gets recast one last time. It's not a lie and it's not an act of care, it's something much, much more primal. It's the last, desperate instinctual twitch of an organism trying to preserve itself in the face of total annihilation. It's not a moral act, it's just a biological reflex.
So, what on earth can we take away from this bizarre philosophical cage match? Well, the debate itself reveals something really fundamental about how we, as humans, confront chaos. It really boils down to two very different ways of seeing a crisis.
This whole affair shows us this tension, right? Between trying to understand chaos with cold, hard systems versus trying to frame it with empathetic, human stories. It tests the very limits of our worldview when we're faced with something truly inhuman. Do you see a crisis as just a technical problem that needs a fix, like a tube of liquid drywall? Or do you see it as an ethical demand that requires a human response? And maybe, above all, it shows our desperate, almost pathological need to find meaning, even in this.
And in the end, we're left with this really haunting line from that very first paper. It brings us right back to that cosmic horror perspective, that the boundaries we build are just illusions, our attempts to fix them are futile lies, and the only thing that's truly real is the traumatic memory of that moment when chaos broke through. And that leaves us with the final question. When the wall of your world is breached by something overwhelming and incomprehensible, what is it? Is it a meaningless quantitative event that you should just try to block out? Or is it a deeply human problem that calls out for a response, no matter how flawed or inadequate that response might be? At the end of the day, the answer you choose probably says a whole lot more about you than it does about the whole.